Right, let's get going. So I was had curry last night. Is Hubert here? And Hubert made a comment which completely took me off guard. He said it was like the prodigal son returning to the ACCU. And I'm rarely offended, especially by Hubert. But I started to think about it. And I started to think, well, one, I haven't had a large inheritance to go and spend. And two, what did I do wrong? So I'm assuming that what I did wrong was stopping being a member a few years ago. But what I will argue with Russell about is that I don't think we built a community the hard way because we had such a good basis from the ACCU to build it on. So I understand there's a lot of new people in the room, so a lot of people who don't know me. So unashamedly, this talk is mostly going to be about me. There'll be a little bit about Norwich, there'll be a little bit about the technical community in Norwich, but it's mostly going to be about me. So those of you that know me know that I'm confident, but I'm not arrogant. Is that fair? Would anyone like to argue with that? Wow. Right. Those of you that don't know me, I'm confident but not arrogant. But what I will say is that when I was giving this talk last year, because I gave it here in a shorter version as another presentation, the thing that really came across, the thing that makes building a tech community, the thing that makes it work, is ego. Okay? Most people think ego is a bad thing, and it can be. But ego is what drives one individual to do something. So everybody says to me, why do you do it? Expecting me to say, I like giving back to the community. But it's about 95% ego. It's that feeling of getting lots of people in a room that have come to see some presenters you've brought up. You're adding value to them. That's what makes me feel good. And the other 5% is just about giving back to the community. So all of the stories I'm going to tell today are going to be true. However, just bear in mind that Zaphod Beeblebrox told lots of stories about him as well, and they weren't true. So, anyone hazard a guess where this is? Salisbury. Does the code of conduct allow us to make comments about Russians? So, no, this is Norwich. This is the classic Norwich shot. So this is up from a place called Mousehold Heath, right across the city. You can see that we've got two cathedrals, one beautiful cathedral and the other one. Unlike Bristol, we've still got our castle, which is also good. But yeah, I mean, this is a real modern technology city. When I say technology city, we've got more technology companies than you can shake a stick at. And unlike Cambridge, we know there's an outside world as well. So does that contravene the code of conduct? No. Well, yeah. See if I'll be removed from stage. So this is me, slimmer, more hair, around about 2000, just when I was finishing university, and I was interviewing for jobs. It's the first time I'd had a suit. I'm not entirely sure my taste in ties was very good, and I still thought a suit and an earring were a good idea, but not anymore. So this is also shortly before I joined the ACCU, because I moved to work in Sheffield. I went to University of Leeds, and I worked in Sheffield for a company designing software for marketing machinery. And I got frustrated because the people around me, I was fresh out of university, the people around me didn't seem to really know their craft very well. They were all young. They'd obviously been taken on young like me, taken on because they were cheap, and they didn't see. When I was stuck, there was nobody there that could help me. We were developing a new product based on an old product, so it was all new technologies for the company as well. So one way or another, fairly long story I won't go into, I ended up joining the ACCU, which some people have described in the past as a bit of a baptism of fire, which isn't quite how I remember it, but it was fairly unpleasant. Is Derek Jones in the room? No Derek? So I'm told, reliably, or not so reliably, that within about 10 minutes of me joining ACCU General, he'd blocked me. I didn't realize it was quite that bad. But so the thing I was struggling with when I joined the ACCU, we had this piece of software we were writing. And it was to allow you to draw what you wanted to mark on this piece of machinery on the screen. And there's a company in Italy who were producing most of it. And they had these things called FNT fonts. So in my naive mind, I'll go and ask all these experts. I'll tell them I'm struggling with FNT fonts, and they'll know exactly what I mean. I couldn't have been more wrong. It's not because you guys aren't experts, it's because I didn't provide enough context and I made too many assumptions. So, and I came in and expecting it all to work, and then I was really irritated when I couldn't get help, and you do all those things that you do when you're young, and basically I made an arse of myself. Am I allowed to say arse? Yeah. But that was the part of my learning experience. So you guys have had more of an impact on my career than any other factor. So, I mean, my degree was electronic engineering, so it wasn't going to be useful anyway. But the help, the guidance, the support, the hours the likes of Kevin Henney, Phil Nash, Alan Kelly have spent helping me with stuff I'm going to get emotional in a minute, but has really helped my career. And I started making a list of all the people that have helped me. But I very quickly ran out of space and realized I couldn't get everyone in. So rather than leave somebody out, I'm just going to say a very big thank you to all of you, because you've amazing impact on my career. We'll talk a bit more about the things that Kevlin and John Jagger and other people have done a bit later on. So let's move on to my first conference. So this was the Motor Museum. I was trying to work out when it was, and Google wasn't helping me. 2002? Yeah? So my first conference, my first ACCU conference, my first conference anywhere. And I've become quite friendly with John Cricket through ACCU General, and we stayed in the same hotel. And we went along for the first night drinks in the Dirty Duck. Can't remember where. What was the town near there? Leamington. So the Dirty Duck in Leamington. And I hadn't been there very long. And Phil Hibbs, is he here? No, none of my plants are here. I hadn't been there very long, and Phil Hibbs sat down in front of me and said, I know someone who's really looking forward to disliking you. Which was somewhat disconcerting. Here I am in a room full of people. I know their names, I don't know their faces. I'm gradually being introduced, and there's somebody I've got to avoid. So this somebody, and I know she's not here because she's somewhere in Asia at the moment, was a lady called Linda Parks, who some of you will know quite well. And basically, my overexcited, needing to be hit over the head with a newspaper puppy attitude on ACCU General just wound her up completely. So anyway, we spent the whole of the conference avoiding each other for obvious reasons. And then there was a couple of years later, I think it was, there was a meeting in London. I'd arranged some drinks in London. We all got together as the ACCU for some drinks. And she invited me to stay at her house, which I thought was a bit odd. So I went along. I stayed at her house, and we've been firm friends ever since. They came to our wedding. So even though it was the most uncomfortable conference for me, I think, ever, it turned out to give me one of the best friends I've had as well. So I'm going to talk about a few of the things that I've done while I was a member of the ACCU. And if you lean on me hard enough afterwards, Russell, I'll send you a check for another membership. So we started something called the Mentor Developers. So I had this idea that we could get some of the more senior people in the group to help mentor some of the younger people in the group. And I suppose this was my hard learning that Russell was talking about earlier, because I hope that people would just do it. Yeah, we'd say mentors do this, the mentees do this, they do their homework, they get together at this time, it just happens. But I couldn't be more wrong. People, especially when it's voluntary. It's another important lesson I learned. When it's voluntary, people still need to be managed, okay? You can't tell them what to do, but you can encourage them to do things and to do the right things at the right time. So after a while, I can't remember what happened. I think it's probably when I left the ACCU, we stopped doing the Mentor Developers. And I'm not sure if it goes on now or not. But one of the things I learned is when people volunteer, they come in with great ideas. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I want to do this. I've got the time. I'm going to do it. But there are two things. You can't get upset with somebody if they don't do it because they're volunteering. And often, if somebody isn't being paid for something, it's not a priority. So they do it if they can. That doesn't always get done. And that's been an issue throughout what I've been doing. So a few years later, I went to work for Lehman Brothers. Burkhart, are you here? He's probably still working on his slides. It's just a shame because he's the only person that's mentioned twice, but never mind. Right, so I went to work for Lehman Brothers, and while we were at before I went to Lehman Brothers, I used to come down for lots of interviews with lots of different banks, just like everybody else who went to work for Barcap and other places in the in the noughties, it was a case of we just saw the money and went where the money was. And then I personally had the biggest surprise because I thought all the best developers would be there. And obviously outside the ACCU, the developers were just like they were everywhere else. They were just paid a lot more money. So I absolutely hated working at Lehman Brothers. It was unfriendly. I mean, bear in mind, I come from Norwich. I'd worked in Leeds, a few other places. London was really a really unfriendly place to work. So I was quite pleased to get out. But while I was there, we started doing more ACCU things. So Russell came and spoke for us while I was at Lehman Brothers. I can't remember what you spoke about, but I do remember we'd booked the room for a particular time, and as soon as that time was up, the projector disappeared into the roof, all the lights come on, and we had to leave. And we started doing various different ACCU type stuff in London. We also started having Christmas dinners. We kept doing the pub meets, which used to be at the same time as the W21, no, not W21, the C++ panel meeting, so we used to make a weekend of it. And ACCU London is still going on today. Fran, are you here? Well, hey, so Fran arranges ACCU London now. After I came back to Norwich, after Lehman Brothers, I came down and I spoke, and there are regular things that are going on in London now, which is great. And I think Roger's still doing the lunches, and there's one in West London and one at Canary Wharf now. Is that right?
West London one, yeah.
Brilliant. So these are all the things that we started when I was in London, and it's great because we started getting things happening outside of the conference. So, like I said, I was at Lehman Brothers. So I was still living in Norwich, still had a house in Norwich, and I was commuting weekly. And then this happened. So this is my wife, who is in the front row, sitting next to Russell. So after leaving Norwich, having been there for 2 years, and going to London to work for Lehman Brothers in September, I then met Charlotte in December, and that was kind of what started the ball rolling in coming back to Norwich, because we got married in the following October, and decided that I didn't want to be in London. So I went back to Norwich, and I worked at a company locally in Norwich for a while. While we're talking about Norwich, does anyone know what this is? It's a mine. It's a mine. Where do you think that is? Sorry? Underground. Anywhere more precise than just underground? Actually, no. It's not a long way underground. Not that one. There is one behind a pub. Oh, come on. Is someone going to say Norwich, please?
Norwich.
It's in Norwich. Who would have believed it? So this one isn't near a pub, and this one isn't near a pub either. So this is 1987. That's a double-decker bus, and its bum is disappearing into a chalk mine, which actually is just down the road. In fact, you can just see it at the top left-hand corner from the cathedral that's not so nice in Norwich. So Norwich is absolutely littered with chalk mines, and a lot of them are like this. So you can go in. Okay, you're not meant to, but you can go in, and there's headroom, and they're big, relatively stable. Sorry? Not for buses. No, unfortunately, they've completely filled that one now, so you can't get in. But it's a shame. And some of you may remember that I think it was Chocolate Bar at the time. Nothing fills a hole like a double-decker. Well, that was inspired by this. So yeah, it's one of the things I love about Norwich is the history, and particularly the secret, in this case, underground things like the mines. Like I said, there's lots of them. And in recent years, there's another one that's come open that you can get into, and the one in the other photo you can get into as well. And these things are vast. I mean, they go on for miles. It's incredible. Right, so after 3 years working at a startup in Norwich, I'd had enough, and the lovely lady over there just said, I don't care what you do, go back to London if you have to, but get out of that job. So that's what I did. So I went to work for Barcap, like lots of us at the ACCU have. And again, I went to work for Burkhart. So one of the things, I've only worked for 2 investment banks, and one of the things that has always plagued me throughout my career is am I good enough to work at investment banks? Or am I good enough just to work for Burkhart? I don't know if I'm ever going to find that out, but I just have to live with it. So anyway, while I was in London, and this is where the story really starts. How am I doing for time? Yeah, this is where the story really starts. I really enjoyed going to XTC. So this is a relatively recent XTC image, only from a couple of years ago, of Liz. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm getting ahead of myself in the slides, but I wanted to do something like this in Norwich when I went back. So I was only at Barcap for 9 months, and there's an interesting correlation between 9 months and something else that happens, because I'd only been at Barcap a few weeks, and I had to tell Burkhart for the second time that Charlotte was pregnant and we were having another baby. So, yeah, after 9 months, moved back to Norwich and went to work for Aviva. Only place at the time that would pay the rate that I was looking for. So I went to work for Aviva, and I wasn't writing code. I was pen pushing. We were literally designing software which should be sent off somewhere else to be built and then come back. They spent in excess of £30 million implementing a system that way that we developed at the startup, or something similar we developed at the startup for about $500,000 a few years before. But there was no telling them. Okay, they're stuck in the way that they're doing things. I've said the name of the insurance company out loud, haven't I? Yeah. There was no, they wouldn't change. They're starting to now. All the development is being brought back in-house, and it's starting to work really well. So those are my kids. Obviously, they're a bit bigger now, but I couldn't do a presentation about me without this. Who knows what this is? It's a windmill. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So this is a 1977 Triumph TR7 with a 3.5-litre V8. Does anybody know anything about these cars? Not at all. Sorry, who knows something about them? It's not a TR8, no. No. Anybody concerned about the 1977 bit? So they didn't start making drop head coupes until 1980. And this obviously is a drop head coupe. So this car originally began its life as a 2-litre fixed head TR7. And then somewhere in its life, before I got it, somebody bought the drop head chassis, and they moved everything over, and they did the V8 conversion. So this is a TR7 V8 rather than a TR8. If it was a genuine TR8, it would be worth about 10 grand, and I bought this for 2. So there's quite a difference. But anyway, so this is one of my loves of my life. Again, when the kids came along, it went. And the solicitor gained, because that's how we paid for the house move. Right, okay, so I'm back in Norwich. And like I said, I really enjoyed XTC, and I want to see if we can do something in Norwich. I grew up in Norwich. I went away to university in Leeds. I ended up back there for reasons I won't go into. And I had no idea there was a tech community there. You've got to bear in mind, by this stage, I'd spent 3 years at a tech company, and I'd worked a bit for Aviva, but I had no idea. So I thought we could perhaps try to start doing something like XTC. So we all decided to go to the pub. When I say we all, I think it was about 5 members of my team from Aviva. And that was it for a couple of times. It's just people like you from my team in Aviva turning up in the pub for a drink to supposedly talk about Agile, which really, from an organisation that was going through a Agile transformation at the time, was just a whinge fest, really. So, remember what I said earlier about ego? Yeah, 5 people, 6 people from my team sitting in a pub whinging about Agile isn't enough for me. So I started to think about how we could draw more people in. And the obvious thing for me was speakers. So I knew exactly who I wanted to speak at the very first one. Rachel Davies here. I didn't plan this very well, did I, Russell? So I wanted Rachel Davies to come and speak because it was an Agile thing. I wanted to talk about user stories. User stories were the things I felt people needed to get a grasp of at the time. So we got some sponsorship from a local company. We got a room. Rachel agreed to come. Great. We had 30 people, which is brilliant, right? 30 people from my team at Aviva. It's still progress. Most of them were encouraged to go by their managers, and they came that first time, and they didn't come to the next one. So at the next one, I had Alan Kelly. Alan, are you here? No. I had Alan Kelly come, and he did one of his retrospectives, and we started to see other people from the tech community. We didn't know it was them at the time, but coming in and started to join us. And then by the time we got to the third one, I had Liz Keogh come and speak. And when I look at this picture, there are 2 things I noticed. One is that I don't actually remember who half these people are. And those that I do remember, most of them aren't from Aviva. Most of them are starting to come from the tech community in Norwich. People are starting to come out of the woodwork. Around about this time, I met these people. See the T-shirt I'm wearing? Yeah? I met these people. So you remember I spoke about ego? in this group of 5 people, there are at least 3 massive egos, one of which is mine. And the lady on the end here is an entrepreneur, and she'd started a group to bring entrepreneurs and software developers together because she wanted to build a music platform, so she needed to meet developers. The guy on the far end, guy by the name of John Fagan, he is a serial entrepreneur and startup builder, and he wanted to bring more of a community together. And the guy in the middle, Stephen, he was a teacher, and he got frustrated with teaching, and he wanted to do software. So he formed a group in Norwich called Norwich Developers, who had one meeting in a pub, and I did the walking skeleton workshop that I was doing a few years ago. And that was the only meeting they ever had, because the 5 of us decided to get together and form something which was called Sync Norwich. And Sync Norwich is basically Agile East Anglia, which was the group that I'd formed. Juliana on the far left-hand side, her entrepreneurs group, and Norwich Developers, and we all came together. And Seb, the guy second from the right, he wanted to get involved. He also runs a local business very, very similar to the one that I run. And we got together in the building that's just to Juliana's right, and we had 60 people. So we were absolutely amazed at the time. We had 60 people in Norwich from different tech companies all coming along to one of our events. And this just kind of kept going. So we did monthly events, tech, agile, a couple of speakers, lots of drinks, a barbecue quite often, those sorts of things. And people just started coming. They just started coming out of the woodwork. And when you bear in mind that I'd been in Norwich since I was born, and I'd never seen anything of the tech scene. This was brilliant. It was really starting to come together. And then one October morning, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a conference in Norwich? Because I knew exactly who I wanted to open a conference. And I thought that we could probably organise it in time for February, which we did, although the snow nearly got us. And I didn't know if the others would go for it. But they were like, yeah, if you do most of the work, we'll have a conference. And I thought we would get 40 people in a room similar to one of the seminar rooms like this, like you've got here. We'd have one track. I knew who I wanted the speakers to be. Job done. By the time that we'd finished planning and promoting it, we were in a massive hall. I've got a photograph. In fact, no, this is the massive hall on the left-hand side. In Norwich, it used to be a huge banking hall owned by Barclays. And rather than 40, we had 140 people, which doesn't sound like a lot looking at all of you, but this is the first event of its type ever in Norwich. 50% of them were sent by people from Aviva, by managers at Aviva. The other 50% were locally from the community. And the person that I wanted to open the conference in Norwich, or the first conference that I was going to run, was Kevlin Henney. Kevlin, are you here? Everyone's working on their slides. This is right. So and Kevlin came, and it all. So I didn't think he'd say yes, because one of the other things that I've learned as I've been doing this is that people like to be asked, and if they can do it, they will come and do it. Whereas when I was starting, before I asked Kevlin for the first time, he was Kevlin. He was up there. He was. I don't mean he's not now, but he's really important. Why would he want to come to Norwich and speak? Right. But he was really keen to do it, and he has been back to every single conference that we've run since. Bearing in mind there's been one every year, with the exception of one. So he comes back regularly, which is great. What I did do, though, was get my timings wrong, and I cut him off about halfway through his opening keynote, and he's never let me forget it. And he paid me back a couple of years later by completely missing the time slot for his and turning up late and losing his entire audience to somebody else. So it's swings and roundabouts. So other people who spoke at this conference were Giovanni, who is over there. Liz Keogh came back up. Alan Kelly came to speak. And a guy whose name's now escaped me, an Australian guy, who spoke about Agile. And we had a tech track, as well as just the Agile track that I had in mind. We had a tech track. And then at the end, we had a local entrepreneur who came and closed the show and talked about his time at Multimap. So, do you remember what I was saying about ego? Something else that Hubert started to talk about last night was how these groups grow, and they've got one individual who is driving everything, and then they're often frustrated by the people around them who either, and I'm generalizing a lot here, either have their own vision and are pulling in a different direction, or they want to get involved, as I was indicating earlier, because it's because they're not being paid for it, I'm assuming that's the driving force, that nothing gets done. So the situation that I found myself in was that I had at least 2 other people in the group who had their own vision and wanted to pull in a different direction. So I found myself after the first 6 meetups, where you've got to bear in mind we had 100 people come to see a speaker from Facebook. We had over 100 people come to the football ground to hear various speakers, and we had a Viva and other local tech companies fighting over who was going to sponsor us and who was going to give us the most money for the conference that was coming up and all that sort of thing. So I went out on a bit of a high after 6 meetings, decided it wasn't for me. I wanted some time back in my life. I was going to walk away from Sync Norwich, and that was going to be that. The problem is, as well as an ego problem, I have a boredom problem. And because we'd done everything that was sort of business and a bit tech and agile focused, I still didn't believe there was a need or an appetite in Norwich for pure tech. So I thought I'd give it a go. So just a few months later, we formed a Mongodb users group. And these are the 30 people who are really interested in tech who came along to it. And I suddenly thought, yeah, people really want the hardcore tech stuff. So we did 3 of these Mongodb user groups. We got a little bit of support from Mongo, but not a lot. We had Trisha G come over and talk to us about MongoDB because she was there at the time. And that was great, but the ego came back into it again and I wanted more. And around about this time, I'd met Dom, wherever Dom's gone. And Dom had actually come to interview with me a few years before. And I'm embarrassed to say we turned him down, mostly because of the ego. Come on. But Dom is now a very good friend of mine. We've worked with each other in various different capacities, and he's great. So I got together with Dom, who was working at Virgin Wines at the time, and another guy called Ben Taylor, who's now started a very successful startup, which is now a multi-million-pound startup in Norwich, because Ben had worked for me previously as well when we were interviewing Dom. And we got together and we formed something called Norfolk Developers, which was at Virgin Wine. So this is St James's Mill in Norwich. It's a mill by the river. Used to be a cotton mill, and there are various tech companies in there. There were various tech companies in there. And they had a space, so we came along and we met. And this is our first meeting. We had Phil Trelford, who you can see on the right-hand side there. Do people know Phil Trelford? Yes? No? Very talented .NET speaker. He came and wrote a compiler for us in one session once. The only problem is he really does like to speak, and this went on for a very long time, but it's good stuff. We also had Liz Keogh come back, and she opened for us, which was great. So we started doing lots of different Norfolk Developers things. Our mainstay were these first Wednesday of the month, 45-minute sessions. We've now got it where it's normally a visiting speaker and a local speaker, and that's been our mainstay and gone on for the last few years. But then we started to realize that 45 minutes isn't long enough because people can't get really into a topic. So I thought, well, why don't we have a workshop? Why don't we get a speaker over for a day? I had a contracting company that was doing really well at the time, so I thought I could take the hit if it all goes wrong on a single one-day workshop. And so we had one of the speakers come back from Neo4j, and this is our very first half-day workshop. Now, this is a sold-out workshop. I know it doesn't look very busy, but at the time, I priced it so that we didn't have to sell out, and then we did sell out. And everyone came along, they had a great workshop. So we decided to start doing it every month. And every workshop would sell out, which started to leave me with a little bit of a tax problem. So after a particularly difficult tax return, I decided that it was time to set Norfolk Developers up as a limited company. So we are now a limited company. Its finances are completely separate from mine. And that works really, really well. What I will make clear is that I don't make any money from any of this. If anything, it costs me money. The limited company behind is just a vehicle to allow us to do it. But again, I get bored easy. So as well as the first Wednesday of the month meetings, as well as the workshops, we started doing other things. So we do a breakfast now quarterly. Some of the guys, some of you may recognize this guy at the front, his name's just gone, Clive Lewis. So he came along to a breakfast, to one of our breakfasts. Those obviously tend to get more people, and he came and he talked to us about what it was that tech business leaders needed in Norwich so that he could do something about it. Most of our breakfasts are about half as well attended, but we have normally a local speaker come and talk about the tech that they're doing from a business point of view, and it gets more business-focused people into the tech community, into the tech audience, if you will. So the breakfasts do really well. We've now passed them on to a company of solicitors locally who run them for us. So it's one less thing on our plate, and they're doing very well. We also went through a period of time of doing lunches, which is great. But people in their very nature are flaky. So they'll say they come and they don't come. Okay, or we'll turn up at I suspect Roger suffers from this a lot. You'll turn up at the restaurant, and by the time the restaurant have taken your orders and brought the food, it's pretty much time for half the people to go home, or go back to work, rather. And then you quickly discover that those in full-time employment aren't quite as flexible as those of us who aren't in full-time employment, and it becomes messy. So the solution to this that we came up with was to pre-order the food so it'd be ready when we got to the restaurant. There are two problems with that. The first one is people are constantly changing their mind, booking at the last minute, so you're constantly breaking off from what you're doing, updating the orders, sending them off to the restaurant, and then you get to the restaurant and they prepare the food and people don't turn up, which again presents a bit of a problem. Sometimes the restaurants are understanding, sometimes they're not, and somebody is out of pocket. So where I'm going with this is that the lunches were brilliant, but they just became too much hassle, and there wasn't somebody else I could pass them on to, so they've gone by the wayside. We tried some other things. So some of you may have seen in London Agile on the bench. Anyone come across that? So the idea is that people who are interested in Agile turn up at a communal bench somewhere, and people do a speech, do a talk on Agile, and you listen, and that's basically the premise of it. It worked quite well. We had two problems. One was it was just too much, and I ran out of time with all the other things I was doing. And the Agile on the bench people got really upset because we wouldn't take on all their branding and follow their guidelines and all the rest of it. Until I pointed out that really wasn't very Agile, and they just forgot about it and went away. So Agile on the bench was something that we did. Now, one of my proudest moments at Norfolk Developers was getting this chap along. Everybody knows Uncle Bob, I hope, still. I know the ACCU's come a long way in the last few years, but everybody still knows who Uncle Bob is, right? I was promised those a heckling last night. I've not had any, by the way. I just like to point out at this stage. So Uncle Bob came up. He happened to be in Norwich. Happened to be in London. Doesn't happen to be in Norwich. Happened to be in London. So he came up for the evening, and he was brilliant. We had a packed house, and he did his presentation. Again, I'll explain why in a minute, but things had been sort of contracting a little bit. So it was great to have a room full of a best part of 80 people come to hear Uncle Bob talk. And he was brilliant. He was entertaining. He was politically incorrect. He was just brilliant. So it was really good. When I tried to get him back for the conference the following year, unfortunately, his fee had gone up quite a lot. So unfortunately, he's not been back yet. Then one of the other things that we tried with Norfolk Developers was to do a magazine. Is ACCU magazines, are they still in print? So the ACCU magazine is doing fantastically, and the people who run it must be amazing because this is bloody difficult. Yeah, these things cost money. So at Norfolk Developers, we don't work on any sort of subscription model. People are members for free, and if events cost money, they cover the cost and they pay as a one-off. So we don't have a bank of subscriptions coming in that allow us to produce a magazine. So the magazine lasted for a while until it was called the Norfolk Tech Journal, and until I sold it to a colleague of mine for £1, and Norfolk Developers just swallowed the debt that it was in because we just couldn't get people to advertise, we couldn't get the distribution, we couldn't do anything like that. And while I was considering getting rid of the magazine, a friend of mine said something to me which has stayed with me ever since, because one of my concerns was that I'd give it away to somebody and it would die. And it's on its last legs anyway, but I'd give it away to somebody and it would die. And they said to me, nobody will ever love one of your projects the way that you do. And I never considered it that way because I was so absorbed in it and it felt brilliant. I thought everybody else would love it. But it's like your code, isn't it? You're there, you've built a brilliant piece of code, and then one of your colleagues comes along and goes, no, I could have done that better, you did this wrong, you did the other. It's like that. No one's ever going to love something you do the same way that you do. And that, in a way, gave me a release, because once I accepted that and stepped away, even though it did die, I was comfortable with it, and I knew why. A few years later, I'm going to talk about the conferences at length in a moment. When the conferences came again, we decided to resurrect the magazine as a conference program. So we had the articles in it, and we had all of the sessions for the conference in. And it was really, really popular. You know what it's like at the end of a conference? There are bags that have been given out, strewn everywhere, the contents of the bags strewn out everywhere. People just haven't bothered to take it home. But this time when we did the magazine, they all went and people came back for more. They loved the magazine. So we started doing it again every 6 months. But it is one of those really, really time-consuming things. And without the financial backing, it's really difficult to get people to do it. But it's coming along. So I put these particular slides up. So you can see Kevin there, obviously, who is doing, must have been him doing the opening at SyncConf. And does anyone know who this guy is? It says his name there, but do people recognise John Skeet? Yeah? So John Skeet, I discovered recently is my age. I always thought he was much older. And he works for Google at the moment, but he's worked for Microsoft, and he wrote what I consider to be the Bible for .NET programmers, C# programmers, which is C# in depth. It's C# in depth, isn't it? And again, he was a Kevlin figure to me. He was a almost untouchable. Why on earth would he want to come to Norwich? But we asked him, and he said yes. So he came along something like the second or third conference, and he's been along to every one ever since, and he always comes. And every time he doesn't expect to be invited. Okay, he doesn't understand why people want to come and see him speak, but he's engaging, he's brilliant, and he's written this book that's helped a lot of people. So this kind of allowed me to get even more into asking even bigger names to come along. Does anybody recognise Mike Butcher from TechCrunch? No? So this was some years ago. This was after I left Sync Norwich. But Mike Butcher is, he was at the time the editor at large at TechCrunch, and he came to Norwich, and we were back in the same hall where we'd had the first conference. And 350 people came out on one night just to see this guy. We'd never seen anything like it from a tech event in Norwich, and that was the biggest tech event in Norwich for quite some time. So people are starting to come, and people are starting to see the value. We've got the problem that I suppose everybody is seeing in Norwich at the moment, where there are lots and lots of tech companies, but there aren't enough people to do the job. There aren't enough software engineers in Norwich. And you see the same old people either moving around, or the same old people who are struggling to stay anywhere for any length of time. Right, so where do you think this is? Oh, it says it at the bottom. This is Norwich. And unlike Bristol, we've still got a castle, which is quite nice. Oh, I said that already. And there used to be a wall all the way around Norwich. And this was my first real sort of excitement about the history of Norwich. Because I'd grown up seeing the wall, but I'd never really been and looked and seen where it was. And then I went to the Castle Museum, so the castle is now a museum. And there was a gallery of all the pictures of the towers and the bits of wall that used to be standing in Norwich. And I became obsessed to the point where I was going out at lunchtime and tracing where all the different bits of wall were. And it's fantastic. And you can see from the image here that there's lots of towers and there's lots of gates, and it's in two halves. There's another building just about here, which it was called Cow Tower, which everybody is sure was part of the wall, but as you can see, it isn't. The wall finishes there and starts again there. But it was used as a gun emplacement to watch. You picture at the beginning of Across Norwich? Well, so it would allow you the gun emplacement would allow you to look up that hill to see when invaders or whatever were coming. But anyway, we've got lots of wonderful towers, or we had lots of wonderful towers, and we've got lots of gates. There are loads of gates, and obviously there are the streets named after the gates in Norwich. One of the saddest things about Norwich is there is not one gate left, not a single wall gate left. And there are a number of reasons for this. Some of them were bombed by the Nazis, and some of them were knocked down in order to make the inner ring road. What were people thinking? So anyway, I love Norwich. I've been right round the wall. These bits, including the towers, are still here, and there are various other bits in different places, but it's fantastic. If you come to Norwich, come and walk around the wall. It's much better than the one they've got in York. Right, NordevCon. So, as you may have pieced the timeline together in your minds, I left Sync Norwich in December. We agreed that I'd still help with the conference the following February, but then that should have been it. But one of the things I was adamant about was I really wanted to keep the conference going. So we've run a conference now called NordevCon, which is short for Norfolk Developers Conference, which several people in this room who are hopefully actually here have spoken at. So Russell's spoken, Jez has spoken, lots of different people have spoken at NordevCon. And we took the first one where are my numbers? We took the first one from 140 people to 180 people. So that was just in 12 months. And then the following year, we had over 400 people. So this is 400 people at a place called the King Centre in Norwich, which is where we run the conference every year. And it's based loosely on the ACCU conference, but that's definitely, I mean, when I was saying at the beginning that I didn't learn too much of the hard way because I had something to follow, and the title of this presentation suggests building from nothing, well, almost from nothing. I'm very much referring to the ACCU and the things I learned by coming to this conference. Just before I go into that, Don was very kind the following year to do, no, it wasn't at the conference, it was somewhere we were talking about the conference to a lot of people, and he'd done the maths, and he compared the number of people who came along to NordevCon to the population of Norwich, and if you'd done that same conference in London, it would be the equivalent of a conference of 1,500 people. Now, you remember that ego I mentioned at the beginning? That made me feel amazing, and this is what I wanted to do. There was just one problem with this 400 people conference, and we couldn't fit everybody in. You get everybody in this 650 seater room, but once you start breaking out into the smaller rooms, people couldn't get in where they needed to, so it was too many. So we have to limit it to 350 now, which is a shame, because that's the same number that came to see Mike Butcher, and that's the only thing that made, well, the 400 was the only thing that made this the biggest tech event that there has been in Norwich. So yeah, so it's based on the ACCU conference. It was just the Friday, and after the keynote, we break into 5 tracks, normally 2 tech tracks. We have a business track to try and get business people in the room. It's not a pure development conference. We have an agile track, and we have a workshop track where people can come and get some hands-on experience for 90 minutes with a particular technology. We've expanded it now, so we have a schools day on the Thursday, which is also, we have lots of schools come along, and the year before last, we had Microsoft along, and they were helping kids build robots and program robots that would stand up on their own. We have workshops on the same day, again, like the ACCU conference does. We have the main day on the Friday, and then we do Saturday morning as well. But we've had a bit of an epiphany about the Saturday morning. The Saturday morning was meant for those people, those developers primarily, who can't come during the week for whatever reason, so they can come on Saturday. And we also discovered that business people don't come and do anything on a Saturday, so we stopped running business stuff. We just do pure tech on a Saturday. But then we found another issue, that it's Saturday morning, and software developers don't really like getting out of bed. So for next year, we're going to change things. We're going to move everything back a day. The Wednesday will be the schools day and the workshop. We'll start Thursday afternoon, and we'll have an afternoon of pure tech, and then we'll have the Friday as normal. Oh, we have a dinner in the evening. We have a wine reception, all stuff that ideas that I've had from here. We used to do the everybody gets up and moves between courses thing, but people just started complaining about it too much, so we stopped. We had a magician this year, which is an idea I got from when I was here last year. We don't have a cyber goth club that we can do stuff in. But you know, there are various different things that we're doing. It's becoming much more an event and a lot less about tech. So that's the conference. I'd really urge you, please do come and see what the conference is like. It's very different to ACCU. This is pure tech. This is the stuff you can really get your teeth into. There are lots of sessions where you can get your teeth into tech, but there's so much more at NordevCon as well. So if all of this feels like quite a lot over what was effectively 6 years, you were right, because something happened. Does anyone know where this is? Glastonbury. And do you know what's kind of special about Glastonbury? Other than the music's rubbish? Drugs. Sorry? Drugs? No. Can I tell stories about drugs?
Yeah, Glastonbury is not as good as it was in 1983.
Neither am I. So when we arrived at the hotel yesterday, the lady on the bench, the lady behind the counter booked us in, and she said, you've got a room on this floor, and you've got access to the executive lounge where you can go along and you can have drinks, you can have free beer, free wine, and you can have cannabis. Cannabis? Come on, you ought to be laughing at this point. So we couldn't believe what she said, could we? And so she said it again, yes, cannabis. And then it dawned on me, she meant canapes. Which kept us amused. Anyway, so so the thing about Glastonbury is that every 5 years or so, every 4 years or so, it has a break. And that's what we did last year. And the reason we did it last year was that everything I was doing was having an effect on, a physical and a mental effect on me, my family, my work, everything. I was the definition of burnt out, and probably that far away from a breakdown. So I did the only sensible thing I felt I could do at the time, and I took 6 months off. Those were some of the most interesting 6 months that I've ever had, in as much as I really enjoyed not feeling the pressure of running all this stuff. But at the same time, I had this yearning to be back running all this stuff. But I lasted for 6 months before I started doing anything Norfolk developers related. And I wound it back a bit as well, and I got some other people to do some things. Dom has stepped up and done far more. I can just see him yawning now. Someone's just Skyped me. I was horrified that was going to come up on there. Not what I meant to do at all. So yes, and then we got going again in September, doing less events, and it's much more relaxed, it's much more fun now. And I'm actually finding that I'm looking forward to some things. When I was sort of, having great fun with the organising, but actually having to go to them was becoming an issue. And we skipped the conference that following year, and then we've done it again this year, and the conference this year was different. One of the things that made it different was Dom had an idea for something that we initially called the Stephen Fry track, where people would come along and talk about the problems they've had with mental health in software engineering and try and get more people to talk about it. I wasn't sure it would be of interest to a lot of people, and I thought it would put people off. I perceived at the time that people with mental health issues wouldn't necessarily want to come along and broadcast it by being in the audience for something like that. But I was wrong. And the number of people that have come up to me and said, this is the best conference we've been to for a long time, and it's because of the people track, and that's all thanks to Dom, which I'm sure he doesn't remind me of because he's nice and he knows what my ego is like, but he probably ought to remind me of more often. So that's something that's very different that we did this year, and it's had a great effect. I also came away, not just because of what became called the people track, but because there was so much less stress. I was doing things differently in the conference, and I don't know if it's the same for Russell or if it's been the same for Francis every year, but when you got off the back of the conference, you're all right for the next day, and then the following day you hit the cliff and you come down because you're so pumped up and excited and everything's great, and then the come down is absolutely horrible. After this year's conference, I had the most delicate, almost didn't notice come down ever, so things are now becoming very much more different for me. I suppose the point I'm trying to get across is you can do too much, and it's important to do the things that are important to you and important to the community that you're supporting. So, having said that, we then started doing something else, something different. So, what we really want to do is generate more business for the service-based businesses in Norwich. So, predominantly the software companies in Norwich are product-based. And I run a service-based business, and so do a few other people. So we're reliant on other people for our business. We can't just build our product and try and sell it. We have to go and find other people who want something built and build it for them. So I started something called Norwich Biz. Does anybody here know what the BNI is? British Networking something or other? Oh, good. You lucky people. So if you can imagine a networking group that is a cult, where if you don't turn up at 6:30 every Friday morning, they start asking you why and then throw you out, which always seems a bit much to me, and you are forced to refer between other people in the group. So it works really well for builders and that sort of thing, but if you've got a builder in the group and he does a crap job, okay, you're still obliged to refer work to him because you're a member of this group. So it works really well for some people. I tried it once. They didn't tell me just quite how bad it was. Oh yeah, also if you don't get referrals for other people in the group, they throw you out. I wasn't told quite how bad it was, but somebody let on to me before I signed up, and I avoided it. But the one thing that they did really well and that really struck me was that everybody around the table, they have 1 minute at every meeting to tell everybody else who they are, what they're looking for, and how to refer business to them. And they use that to gain more business. And then after B and I do it at breakfast, and after breakfast somebody does a 15-minute spotlight so you can get more in-depth into their business and more understand about how you refer work to them. There was nothing like that for the tech community in Norwich, so I thought we'd give it a go. And it has been really, really successful. So we do it over dinner. We do it once a month. As you can see, the number of people that come along varies. This is an early one. This is a later one. And in October, we had a big dinner. And we had 80 people come along. Obviously, we didn't do a 1-minute round table of all 80 people, but we did have some interesting speakers, and we raised a lot of money for charity. And we moved to a subscription model, but just for Norwich Biz. So these people are signing up to come along every month. There are more members than there are places at the table, so there is an incentive to sign up early and come along, and it all runs very much easier than the lunches did. And people are referring business, and some people have done really quite well out of it. We also bring along people who can support businesses, so accountants, solicitors, what have you, and it's all good. And I expected it would be very clinical, like the BNI was clinical, but it isn't. It's as much a social thing as it is a business thing, and it works really, really well. But Norfolk Developers isn't the only show in town by any means. Russell, I'm going to go over a bit. Is that all right? I'll do it quickly. So this is Sync the City. This is my team from Sync the City winning the People's Award. So basically, I was asked to mentor the team. It's a big event where everybody gets together in teams. Somebody has an idea, and you build it in 54 hours, and then you present at the end to get some money. And there are two awards. There's the main award for everybody, and there's the People's Award, and we won the People's Award. I'd been the previous year and watched people on stage getting excited when they won, and I wondered, what the hell was that all about? But hopefully you can see from my face I've understood exactly what it is about, and the amount of emotion that becomes invested in this team and what they're going to do in that 48-hour period. This lady, second from the left, Lily, it was her idea. We were building an app to help with mental health people. She couldn't get her presentation right, and we worked on it again and again and again, and she got better and better, and then we went on to win the People's Award. There's also another event in Norwich that is the Sync Develop Her Awards, and this is to recognise or to help promote women in technology. So every year they run an award. Different companies can nominate women within their business to come along, and they're judged by a panel of judges. I'd just like to point out in this photograph, I am wearing a full tuxedo. It's not jeans I'm wearing, it's just the colour of the photograph, unfortunately. So there's lots of other things going on in Norwich, and part of that is now a problem. So this is more of a warning on which to finish, and I was talking about this on Twitter yesterday with somebody. There is now too much choice in terms of tech and meetups and other things in Norwich. And the problem with too much choice is that people can only go to so many things, okay? And it becomes really easy to choose to go to nothing. So as a community locally, although we've got lots of choice and there's lots going on, there's too much, and none of us are getting the attendance that is sometimes necessary to sustain the groups, and I'm certainly not getting the attendance which is necessary to sustain my ego. So if you're going to do this where you are, the first thing you should do is see what's already there. And if there's something already there that's good and that you can contribute to that. Help them move it in a slightly different direction, but contribute. Don't start something new, unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's just a warning, and that's me done. Thank you very much.